Welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this month's monthly interview of good friend Fred Brown, who's a CEO and president of the Forbes Fund out of the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area. Fred, welcome. So good to have you.
It's great to be on here. It's great to see you. I miss our in-person meetings, so we always get revived when we have those meetings. So I'm hoping that this engagement at least pricks our consciousness about the work we've been doing together for the past 6 or 7 years now.
Losing track, but yes, getting close to a decade, actually, which is kind of cool. Yeah. Thank you. And Fred's speaking to the work with the Cancer Free Economy Network, where he and I first met, but certainly I've heard your name in circles, especially environmental justice, community participatory research, community-led, driven initiatives for a long time. So I guess, as far as they say, my dad says often things happen for a reason. So I guess there was a reason we were able to come together and end up becoming leaders in this cancer prevention paradigm shift that we're still very much in the thick of, but it's very cool. And I know we certainly continue to get very excited at CEHN about the opportunities to not only lift up the powerful work happening in the Pittsburgh area, that's also, I think, leading us into the future, but also for children, specifically vulnerable populations of all kinds, but definitely our current and next generation. So that's another reason why I've invited you to our forum today, because I know that you're a big picture thinker. You have the realistic, on the ground evidence perspective and experience, but you're not afraid to kind of go there and be audacious, which I very much appreciate. So let's get in here. So Fred, if you could please, you may be new to some of our audience members, so I'd love for folks to hear your journey through your perspective of how you tapped into your personal passions as a community leader, a champion, an advocate, an amazing cheerleader, if you will, for people to be better than where they are currently into the future. And certainly becoming not only a leader in Pittsburgh, but certainly even internationally, regarding all the various skill sets that you hold. And now as president and CEO of the Forbes Fund, which is definitely no small feat. So any part of that journey, I'm sure we could spend the entire time talking about it, but any part of that journey you'd be willing to share, I think a lot of people can have some value added into maybe the bumps, the bruises, but more importantly, the forward-thinking motion and foresight that you had to just stay on the track.
Well, thank you, Nse. I think the most important thing for any listener to ascertain is that you have to be willing to walk a path that most people might be walking the other direction in. You have to believe fervently in your purpose. There has to be some spiritual development in you to really fulfill your dharma. I mean, this journey started for me about 39 years ago as a school teacher. Started dealing with gang intervention work in the 90s, buried 50 kids from gang violence. And early on, I began to really have this idea, like, I cannot fix the system or the problem from my position. So how can I continue to aspire within these institutions to make systemic change from a leadership perspective? And so pretty much in every experience I've had, I've risen to the top or near the top of those organizations. And I've concurrently been an influencer of the leaders. When I was at juvenile court, we created a Voices program, Voices of Concern Court Employees, which was the first of its kind with a cross-sector of white, black, male, female participants, really looking at the dichotomy in juvenile justice. Brought Asa Hilliard and others to Pittsburgh to do analysis on the disproportionate impact of Black and brown people, became a certified court trainer, got trained in climate justice core work at the same time, start cutting my teeth in environmental justice when I saw the discrepancy in the built environment, was identified by the Ford Foundation as a 21st century environmental justice leader in late or early 2000s, late 1990s, became a policy analyst and got to really cut my teeth with a late and great dear person, Cecil, who really helped me refine my skill set in the environmental justice field. Cecil and others, and myself, Ayanna King, we worked on the TLU process, helped to rewrite policy with the Bush administration, really made some powerful moves with getting restrictions lifted, and really began to understand micro, meso, and macro systems application. But I would say the most important thing I learned about this journey is the network. I think so many people of color don't understand the network. Like we call it the hookup, but in a professional construct, there's two frameworks that get thrown around. One is that we get often told that we need to get mentored. And so a lot of us flock to being mentored. What I've learned over the years is you really need, it's not really called a mentor, you need a sponsor, right? To really make significant change within your ecosystems. And most people really don't know the difference. And when I call this out with some of my white colleagues, they go, what is that? I said, come on, you know what that is. And the real difference is there's a multitude of mentorship projects, and I'm not saying they're not well needed or regarded, they are, but I would like to know statistically how many people who've been mentored actually got the job they was pursuing as a result of the mentorship. Whereas as a sponsor, there's a more earnest responsibility of somebody within that ecosystem to vouch for you in doors and rooms that you're never going to be in, or most likely you can't get in at this point in time. And so that sponsor is somebody that goes to bat for you, pushes your name up some list, and you get seen, and people get behind that support in a way that almost guarantees you an opportunity to fulfill your obligations within that particular job search. And so over the course of the years, I've had a multitude of experiences from being an adjunct professor, being a dean of students, and I really like and have enjoyed working on the ground. Most importantly, I really enjoy growing the skill sets of people by succession planning and doing peer-to-peer work, as well as in every job I've had, I've always ushered in a succession plan that included younger people. I did some work when I left juvenile court. I created a project called SMART, Strong-Minded, Active, Responsible Teens, and basically I made a deal with the judges to do deferred dispositions, and the goal was to reduce the number of Black and brown people that got caught up in the system. Over the course of the years of that program, we worked with 500 young people from that community. We only had 2 people recidivate. So I'm quite comfortable and confident that we can design programs that mitigate risks to Black and brown people. The issue that I have learned over the years is that our well-meaning programs might be great at a micro level, but their ability to scale up requires quantum leaps in many of our ecosystems. And so when I returned to Pittsburgh in 2009 after being in Charlotte, and after I was doing my environmental justice work, when I was in Pittsburgh prior to that in the early 2000s, I really began to aspire to look at systems level change and, and really try to understand how do you change systems. And so when I came back, I was the associate director of the Kingsley Association, which is now, I believe, a 148-year-old organization. And in that role, I became involved with transition towns out of the UK, became a certified trainer, got trained in eco districts work. And from that work, we began to build up the capacity of the community, which resulted in 2014, the Larmer community in the city of Pittsburgh being awarded a $30 million Choice Neighborhoods Award. That was transformational because we moved from what I would call transactional work through nonprofit frameworks to transformational work and systems change. That work is still continuing. As a result of that success, I applied for and got the job as the second president and CEO of the Homewood Children's Village, in which your work really helped personify a framework for us to do critical assessments within houses with children about exposures to lead, toxins, and other things. And so the work that we began to pioneer through CFE and CHN really helped us establish a baseline for understanding the gap that exists between resilient communities and those that are more affluent, looking at practices and beliefs that mitigate risk to environmental factors. The work of the Homewood Children's Village around educating kids from cradle to career really brought on this new framework for me that moved my thinking away from single points of contact to ecosystems. And it really began to help me understand there's a real need, in particular in the foundation world, to look at holistic delivery systems versus single points of contact. And so within a 2-year period at the Homewood Children's Village, we were able to go from 3 sites to 13 sites, from 12 staff to like 40 staff, from 1.3 to $3.0 million grant framework for budget. We were able to expand our program in this lens in partnerships with you guys and other institutions. It began to build up national and international interests. As a result of that work, and this is important for people to understand on the call, I did not know at the time people were watching me. Like sometimes you get enamored with your work, or sometimes you might not think your work is being noticed, but people are paying attention if you're moving the needle. And so I think when people saw us get the $30 million Choice Neighborhoods Award, which people told us we would never get, I had a strong belief we would get it. When we got to the village and made our turnaround, people were amazed at how we did it. And so into my second year of a 5-year pivot for the village, and this is important to understand, at the time I'm doing this work, I have a long-standing activist background. When Johnny Gamage got killed in the city of Pittsburgh, I was one of the leading activists that ushered kids walking out of school, challenging the political system, the police departments, convened a group of cross-sector partners, Christians, Jews, Muslims, to march on the city of Pittsburgh. That work really, I cut my teeth on real community development work and advocacy work and activist work. And so when Johnny Gamage got killed, it really brought to bear this need for more of a cross-sectoral approach to dealing with social phenomenon. When Breonna Taylor and George Floyd happened most recently, it reopened a wound that I thought was closed. And my work at the village had led me to a new platform to really look at systems change at a macro level. And so my work with Johnny Gamage really began to have me look at, well, the systems are problematic because there's not people of color in high level positions at C-suite level and such. And so I began to push this agenda downtown about the need for minorities in high level positions. And so when I was at the village, as people were looking at my work, I got tapped by a headhunter to come downtown, and I was not interested. I was like fully engaged in the work we were doing. I was excited. I was seeing our progress. I knew there were some more challenges. But I went to my board chair and I said, hey, I got tabbed to apply for this job. I don't think I'll get it, but I can't continue to push the system on hiring Black people if they ask me to apply for a job and I don't apply. Like, I feel like that'll be duplicitous and my voice will be marginalized as a result of my, anybody could point me out and be like, we offered you a chance to apply, you didn't apply. And so I went to my board chair and I said, hey, Doc, this is what's going on. I want to be transparent. I don't think I'll get the job. So I applied. There were 90 people that applied for the job. I made the top 5. They asked me what my big idea was. I told them I made the top 3. And then they asked me to walk them through my big idea, which I was able to do with great definitive clarity and specificity. And they began to question, well, how do you have all of this data and intel? And I was like, I live this. Like, this is not an idea I have. It's a direct bearing on me having buried 50 kids, me being a school teacher, a probation officer, a football coach, dealing with the Pittsburgh Youth Collaborative, working with 120 of the worst juvenile offenders, trying to recidivate them back into society, or trying to get them back into society and reduce recidivism rates. I've had a number of experiences, including my work with PTEP, Pittsburgh Transportation Equity Project, that gave me insights into micro, meso, and macro systems, policy application, how you move the crowd. My first entree into indigenous research methodology was used at PTEP. And so I was able to figure out, how do you gather data from the community, how do you get them more involved in the work. And during that work, we also trained young people in executing indigenous research methodology and deconstructing bills that their legislators have passed that had adverse effects on their environment and their lifestyle. And we use that work to take those kids at Capitol Hill to petition their legislators about why they voted a certain way on a bill. And we train the kids in how to take the data and make the case. And so when we got up to Capitol Hill and into DC, we got pretty well known pretty quickly about savvy kids and their interests around political decisions that had adverse effects on them. And so when I got the call to go downtown, I immediately knew I wanted to do systems change work. So I was fortunate enough through the work with the Garfield Foundation to be asked to be part of a partnership and exploration with the London School of Systems Change, in which I began to look at and aspire to be one of the grantees or awardees that got this 6-month support system. And so we lucked up, we got this support system. So we did 6 months of critical analysis of systems change at the macro level. And at that point, I realized that, and many of the people on this call might be able to analyze this in a quick moment. As we begin to optimize the existing systems we function in, those systems by primary nature are predicated on a past industrial framework that moves into high tech, but ultimately it's based upon economics. So no matter what we do, we are helping to create an economic driven system that puts as its primary function, making money. And so many of us have figured out how to do that through nonprofit work, through for-profit work, through corporate work, through consultant work. And I learned during that time period that we were contributory, knowingly, unknowingly, willing, and committedly to perpetuating the system we sought to mitigate or change. And so I began in the last 2 years to decouple ourselves from that work and to really look at how do you move from systems change to ecosystems co-creation and to develop continuums of care. And so I can tell you in the last 34 months since I took over at the Forbes funds, 100% of our money is tracked on 2 levels. It's tracked locally through the social determinants of health, and it's tracked globally through the UN SDGs. We can give you dollar by dollar where those resources went, and we've created a dashboard to look at their collective outputs and how we're looking to aggregate their outputs to create a collective impact approach. And we're currently working with CMU on that. And so when I think about big pictures, as you alluded to, I think in decades. And so for me, the most pressing things we have over the next 30 years, and this is just my way of thinking, is 10 critical flashpoints. One is this most recent election that shows a unique divide around our political affiliations. So we as a country have to find a way to heal to address the more pressing issues we have as a species. So how do we take the 2020 electoral process and really begin to drill down into what is the causal relationships with the decisions people made and why did they have those dispositions? 2021, you know and I know that the rental and mortgage moratorium issue will have a direct bearing on people of color disproportionately. And the fact that many governors have asked for a stay of that, and that's may or may not be legally possible, we're looking at during the holidays and early into 2021, evictions rising exponentially. 2022, we will start to see the first impact and recovery plans for COVID. And in my estimation, I have not seen in most grant making a investment in pivoting. Moreover, I've seen an investment in supporting a broken system. And so when I talk to people about our grant making and why we've hesitated on jumping on board, I'm very clear to say that in February 2020, Black people were still getting killed by police. So I'm not in a hurry to reinstitute that system. It was broken. I'm interested in using this moment to reimagine how the system could be different, how through this shared impact that we're having across race, ethnicity, and socioeconomic strata, how we might reimagine our work across sectors to really create this framework for optimizing human beings. And so when we pivoted away from systems change to ecosystems co-creation, our basic mantra was, how do you invest in human beings that can then optimize their space in the universe? And through the optimization of that framework, if you look at the cross pollination of race, ethnicity, and socioeconomic strata, Einstein often refers to this notion that you can't solve a problem with the same energy that created the problem. And so for me, that means how do we resonate at a different frequency where we're looking at problem solvings from multiple lenses. And through that multiple lens experience, we're creating collective genius. And so that's really been our work. And it's exciting to see this work. And I'll give you a quick example. We've initiated several grants in this new grant making process. We just ushered in it with my board at midway in this year, called the Catalytic Community Cohort Grant. And we put $1.3 million into the field as an investment. To date, people only have drawn down on less than $20,000 of that. And people on this call might not understand that. Well, let me say, we put 1.3 million aside for these communities to draw down money. At the same time, we walked into each of those communities as thought partners and helped them to look at how might you optimize your current position? Are you aware of different resources that may be brought to bear to support your idea? Are you in the best position to pull this off? Should you strategically collaborate or merge with other people? What are your back office needs and supports? And so through this continuum, we've been able to galvanize the sector in these communities we've targeted and optimize resources differently that has allowed them to pivot without using their resources. And we've had to coach people, like one of our partners, when COVID first hit, they wanted to buy $50,000 in computers. And I said, well, that's a need. And so I got on the call and talked to some funders, and they said, well, we're about to buy a whole bunch of computers. We probably can hold some for your community to make sure they get some. I said, okay, cool. And so I went back to them and said, let's hold up. Let's not spend the 50 because that's half your money. Let's see if we can work this other deal out. We worked the deal out, made it happen. In that moment, I said, look, given the number, and this was when COVID first hit, there were 42 million people unemployed. And we said, hey, what if you created a two-gen approach based upon Harvard's theory of change, and you were able to work with Penn State and Allegheny County Community College and create a two-tiered approach where we did adult learning with one group. We took students from the college and paid them to mentor kids in high school that were seniors to make sure they were on track academically. And then we had community college create a pre-college experience for credit in their venue. And then we got Penn State to create an adult learning framework. And we did that concurrently so we can look at the arc of the family's trajectory around their academic performance around technology. That was our focus. That cost us, believe it or not, less than $2,000. And that's the kind of stuff that if we would have let or supported our grantees' desire to react, they would have spent most of their resources reacting. And what we're trying to do is get people to be proactive, to really look at what are the pivots, what are the things that we need to do differently given this moment in time. That has led us to our pivot, which was after we froze our assets in 2018 and adopted the systems change framework and shifted our grant making increased by 400% in 4 quarters. That allowed us to have I would say, a much deeper understanding of the stress and shocks that the sector was having. And it allowed us to pinpoint our grant making strategically to ensure more continuity in the sector while concurrently identifying risks to the sector and how certain partners should consider working together given the known stress and shocks coming to the sector. Now, we all had this hypothesis pre-COVID I have to be transparent and say we had no idea COVID was going to happen, but we had already started looking at scenario planning through our grant making, succession planning, and as a result of COVID, we created about 5 new programs. One of which I would like to share real quick is we just created a partnership with Penn State University on an AI for Good initiative to really create ways that artificial intelligence and machine learning could work collaboratively with the nonprofit sector to increase their effectiveness and efficiency. Now, that's a significant arc for us because we went from systems change to ecosystems co-creation. And then how do we use AI learning as a tactical tool to increase smaller nonprofits' ability to compete with larger nonprofits based upon their ability to aggregate data, tell stories, and problem solve. And so we want to level the playing field for some of the smaller organizations to compete in the big game, but also concurrently ascertain, should I be in partnership with these institutions or going head to head? And those pivots have really increased our grant making around mergers, acquisitions, strategic partnerships, back office supports, which was all a strategy we had 34 months ago. We just felt that I can't call you Nse and say you need to partner with somebody as a grantor. I can say to you, Nse, I heard what you said about Chin's work. I just got off the phone talking to Women for a Healthy Environment. You might want to talk to Michelle because it seems like y'all doing some similar work and we funded her. And so there might be a way for Harvard Resources to be collaborated with your idea, and then we could revisit that. And so it really gave people a different way of thinking about how to optimize their platform, how to use our platform differently, and how to leverage that to get existing resources brought to bear on the situation. And so, I mean, that's kind of how I found myself in this position. I would say the bumps and bruises, oh Jesus, I got to write a book on this. I'm the first Black male to ever lead the Forbes funds in its 38-year history, I believe. And so that experience in and of itself requires another show. But I will tell you this, that you got to have thick skin. There are a bunch of unwritten rules that you need to learn about at this level. People weren't expecting you, so you're not going to be well received. And it's part of the blind spots that people have with implicit bias that they don't really recognize that they have. But it also has to do with, to me, the reason that I think we're successful is because you hire the best people and pay them what they are worth. And then you also create ways of problem solving that people haven't considered that prove effective. And, whether you like me or not, the work that we do is about serving humanity. It's not specifically just for Black people, but it is targeting Black and brown people to make sure that they have the same opportunities white people have and other people. And so through that construct of an equity lens, our work has been able to be pioneering in that it crosses race, ethnicity, and socioeconomic strata with an intent focus on utilizing an equity lens.
Wow. So for our listeners, this is why Fred gets the big buck. No, I'm just playing. You have unpacked or just begun to unpack so many important critical points, realities, checks. I hope people are listening very well. What's the beauty of this is you can rewind and rewind again because there's so much fruitful, very real and raw and important information in what Fred has just shared. You got into investment of people. That's vital. And by the way, thank you for lifting up our good friend Cecil Corbin Mark. Those of you that don't know, the deputy director for many, many years of We Act, West Harlem Environmental Action for Justice, who we lost way too soon recently. And I know many of us, like anytime we continue to lose our friends out here, continue to have these very moments, deep moments, private moments where we're taking a huge step back and really trying to look and reevaluate as to our piece, our role in this whole dichotomy of life in these various fights. Many of us are living through unprecedented times right now on many levels. And many of us are experiencing this in different ways, and we don't want to sugarcoat any of that. And we know the ramifications are going to be vast for a while. You also talked about the importance of mentorship, and which we've all benefited from. And if any of us take a step back, maybe it wasn't an official mentorship arrangement, but usually most of us can go back to a teacher, a coach, a community member, the parent down the street that just took a liking to you and just kind of took you under their wing for a little bit. All of these life experiences really do make an impact. And I guess for all of us, the challenge continues to be, how do we absorb the positive and even the negative experiences and turn them around into something that helps to motivate and fuel us to be the best that we can be for the passions that we are trying to serve. And in our case, it's just no hidden agenda. It's everyone, especially those most vulnerable, to having at least a leg up on life. We have time for maybe 2 more questions, Fred, because you've helped to really, a lot of the other questions I had, I think you got into a lot of them already, just naturally. And especially the way that you're proposing we look at, prioritizing some of our much needed social ills that have not been around just since this administration. They've been around. They've only been amplified and further become further challenging for all of us to deal with. When it comes to the issue, very big issue of climate change, climate justice, understanding we are on a serious ticking clock here. We are very much behind. We know this. How might you suggest that some of us out here align, leverage, create better momentum, stronger momentum, and maybe take advantage of this next administration coming in that at least acknowledges climate and listens to scientists and hopefully wants us to be a leg up and be the leader in the global world that we should be, considering the amount that we contribute to the problem. We'd love to hear some of your quick thoughts on what we should be thinking about prioritizing as we go into a new calendar year and new administration.
I will give you these quick flash points. I think they're critical to your question. And so for 2023, racial equity ecosystem needs to be created. 2024, universal income equality needs to be addressed and create quality for that. 2025, AI machine learning has to be addressed. 2026, we have to address the Medicare collapse. 2030, climate change. 2040, minority population to the majority. In 2050, 70% of the world's population moving to the urban corridor. Why did I lay this out? Because each one of these activities contribute to climate change or the lack thereof. If we don't understand and begin with the end in mind, what are we trying to mitigate? Well, when we look at this work and the work that we've done over the last 30 years, I find it difficult to tell surviving people why climate change is important. And until we move them economically to a position where they could thrive, anytime we're asking people to worry about PM10 and PM2.5 air particulate matter, which they can't see, and they could see a gun, they could see poverty, they could see homelessness, we're combating the seen versus the unseen. And both can kill us, just at different speeds and trajectories and velocities. And so until you get people to a place where their resources and Maslow's hierarchical needs are being met, it's almost impossible to equate their cognitive understanding of climate change. And so we have to reverse engineer, and that's why I laid out these other 7 criteria. If we're able to achieve those things concurrently while infusing people's understanding of climate change, we can begin to shift the needle. The other thing I think we were able to do when I was at the Kingsley Association was, for example, we did this project called Put Your House on a Dad. When I first designed the program, it was around climate change and nobody came to the workshop. It was, you hear church mouths, right? I was like, what the heck? So we relabeled it Put Your House on a Dad. And we basically told people if they put their house on a dad, they could save this amount of money through energy use, water use, this kind of stuff. And we aggregated through this open source software we created called Imagine Larmer. We showed every time you pull something down, it saved money every month and over the course of a year. And so we did these community vignettes, let people use it, and it really got them thinking about how to save money. And so we backed into the idea of environmental justice by reducing their impact on the grid. And at this time, Obama had talked about Act 129, and nobody really was doing it. So we were trying to figure out a way, how do we get in there and do that work? And so as we got in there and began to do that work, at the end of the program, people started to equate their savings with a reduction on carbon emissions. And then they began to ask questions about other jobs in the field. And so we started an energy auditors program. We trained people in HVAC and solar panels. So we got the first Black woman ever certified in solar panel installation in Southwestern PA. We trained a number of people in HVAC systems. And it really opened up my eyes. Like, if you reverse engineer the message and you show people how they can arrive at this point through an economic framework, and you couch that with an environmental justice application, you're more likely to get their interest. If they can eat off of the pivot, they can make it happen. If they're hungry and you're talking about environmental justice, that's a much more difficult meal to digest. And so from that work, we ended up winning an award from Penn Futures for the most innovative peer-to-peer energy reduction model in Pennsylvania. And the goal really was, when you do peer-to-peer learning, that learning usually keeps going and building on itself, because it doesn't require me as a practitioner to keep it going. What it requires me to do is to do a TOT, a training of trainers, to increase a person's desire to learn more, and to just cut them loose and put them in a space to do that. We concurrently did a stormwater management project, and we also were able to, at this time, to get 2 developers to adopt our stormwater management system that was supported by the city of Pittsburgh and legislators. So it really forced developers to have to deal with us as a community group, and it gave us a sense of power that the community never had. We were able to stop projects, bring up questions. We created a narrative where we took the Green Enterprise Checklist and compared it to a LEED framework. We crosswalked those things to kind of create a comparative contrast for LEED certification versus Green Enterprise Checklist. We used that language to talk to developers so that they can resonate with it. And then we were able to get the community on board through a lot of behind the scenes activity that really got them to be involved with this. And so I would say we spent at least 6 years training up 15 to 30 community residents that resulted in a $30 million win for the community. And so it's out to me, I know how to make that happen quicker, or more, I would say, yeah, in a more timely fashion, given what we learned. And so I'm interested in seeing that being replicated. But I would say one of the learnings we also experienced was we didn't at the time really garner in succession planning. And so you have people who own the project, rightfully so, but they don't really know how to share the mantle, right? And they, because a lot of them didn't go back to school, they're gun shy against young people coming up that's more savvy with technology and things like that. And so what we're doing now through peer-to-peer learning is creating space where you honor wisdom and youthful exuberance, and you bring that together and allow that to cultivate new ideas. And that has to be intentional. It cannot happen because you want it to happen, or you're willing it to happen, or you think it should happen. There has to be some intentionality to that, which is why we always have young people like looking at how we make sausage behind the scenes. We're doing something with the superintendent right now called Education Ecosystem. We got a young lady who's co-facilitating that work. She's having to go behind the scenes and figure out the agenda, the critical issues, how we're arriving at these points. And these are all things that we want to show young people, that we can't just hand you the keys to the car, because the car didn't just get here like this. Like, there was a lot of labor that went in before you saw this pretty shiny car that got it to this point. And it's a disservice to hand people the keys and stuff, and when they crash it, we're mad at them. Like, I can't believe they crashed the car. Well, they never helped build the car. They have no real understanding of the continuity of the car, other than this looks like the other stuff they see, and they want what they see. And so we really have to spend more time on the mentoring side, the coaching side, the sponsorship side, to really helping people grapple with this, which is really how I got to this international platform. And so to your other point, we have been fortunate because of our vision to be able to share this work on an international level. I just did an international podcast in the UK. And when I tell you that it's amazing where other places can look at your work and have a value for it, and immediately they want to be a part of whatever you're doing. They don't even need you to explain anything. They get it. They're like, this is hot. How can I be involved? And so I just presented in Finland. I presented in Latin America recently. Got invited to the Nexus Global Conference as a keynote. I just did 3 keynotes last week, 2 weeks ago, 1 at Penn State, 2 at Pitt. And so this exposure is bringing to bear from a global perspective, people seeing our vision and seeing this alignment. Concurrently, we've been working with Nora Bateson out of Sweden on warm data labs, and we launched with her support, People Need People, during the beginning of COVID. And so since COVID has happened, we have facilitated 11,146 Zoom meetings with 14,089 participants. And so when people ask us questions about how do we know, we feel like we have a touch point every week at a macro level and throughout the week on the meso and micro level with systems and people who run systems or manage programs to get real intel from them on what they're learning, what we're learning, how we can be better, what did we miss. And what we're doing is really creating a way to cultivate collective genius.
Excellent. Again, I hope everyone's been listening, taking notes, rewind the tape. There is so much as far as case examples, what is showing to have positive evidence domestically and internationally, what is gaining traction, what is actually having some value added with investment, and investment not just monetary wise, energy, capacity, passion, motivation, partnership, which a lot of us are doing, right? Sometimes it takes a while to stumble and to find out where certain journeys and certain routes that we thought were going to be sustainable and helpful to the communities are the farthest thing from that. Putting communities first and actually listening, not just saying, but actually hearing. They know best how best to move forward their communities. And with some additional assistance as they see fit, the gaps that they want fulfilled, the science as well as real lived experience, we will and will continue to make differences. Fred Brown, it's so exciting to continue to hear the many, many ways and the nexus and the ways that you're stimulating as well as advancing a variety of benefits for all of us. I know we will continue to hear about you for years and decades to come. And I hope others look into the work of the Forbes Fund, Homewood Children's Village, and beyond, all the places where Fred has really kind of sprinkled his expertise and mentorship and commitment. It's exciting to see. So thank you for your time. I know you got to run to probably 12 different meetings, but we will definitely talk soon.